Welcome to Therapy in the Great Outdoors, a podcast about the business and practice of nature-based pediatric therapy of all kinds. If you are a nature-loving therapist who works with children, this podcast will help you start taking your work outdoors into nature and help you grow a profitable nature-based therapy practice or program that connects children to nature and changes their lives and yours forever. I'm your host, the ever honest, always 100% real, Laura Park Figueroa. I have been a pediatric occupational therapist for over 20 years. But 7 years ago, I almost left the field entirely. I was so burned out. And nature-based therapy is what saved me. It reignited my love of my work, and I saw profound changes in the children that I was working with. I'm the founder of Outdoor Kids OT and the creator of the Contigo approach, an evidence-based framework for nature-based pediatric therapy services. I've helped dozens of pediatric therapists start and grow successful nature-based practices through my business coaching and online programs, the latest of which is the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community, TIGO for short. TIGO is an online membership site with loads of resources to support you every step of the way as you start and grow your nature-based therapy work. You can find out more at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. Working outdoors with children can be a wild ride. Are you ready for the adventure? Let's jump in. All right, friends, today we are going to talk about earthing, also known as grounding. I have been blown away by the research that I have reviewed on this topic. If you're not familiar with what it is, we're going to talk all about that. We're also going to look at a few different research studies that are out there that actually prove that this is not just pseudoscience. This is not just crazy tree hugger people who think that the earth helps us. It actually is proven by science. So I want to share with you the resources that I've looked at for this episode, and those will be in the show notes. What I am primarily pulling from is a book called Earthing, the Most Important Health Discovery Ever, ? It looks a little tree hugger from the cover, y'all, which I worry turns people off who are actually interested in science, but it is a fabulous book. It was written by Clinton Ober, who is the founder of Earthing, essentially, Steven Sinatra and Martin Zucker, and I believe it was published in 2010. So we're looking at about 12 years ago, and it hasn't been updated that I could find online. So some of this information that I'm going to share with you from the book directly, just know that it is about 12 years old. And then when we look at some of the research studies, those are going to be much more recent. And I hope that this information will help you know why it is so important for children to go barefoot outdoors. Like, that is something that I think a lot of us as nature-based therapists see. Kids tend to pull their socks and shoes off and go barefoot in our groups at times when they are wanting to do so. And the concept of earthing and grounding actually really illustrates why that loss of connection of children's feet and our feet to the earth's surface actually has possibly some detrimental health effects for us. So let's talk about what earthing or grounding is. So earthing is basically connecting your body to the surface of the earth, sitting on the ground or walking barefoot or touching the ground. But grounding is a term that has been used kind of synonymously with earthing. In my mind, earthing makes more sense putting your body actually on the physical surface of the earth. And grounding is a word that is used to use devices that actually allow you to be connected to the earth when you are indoors. So I will talk more about this in a little bit. I'll give you a definition straight from the earthing book, which kind of describes it. Earthing involves coupling your body to the earth's eternal and gentle surface energies. It means walking barefoot outside or sitting, working, or sleeping inside while connected to a conductive device that delivers the natural healing energy of the earth into your body. So if you hear that definition, like I kind of said in the intro here, I think sometimes some of the language we use when we do nature-based practice can be not accessible to people who aren't super connected to nature, right? And I do feel like this book does a great job presenting some of the evidence, but even the way they describe it, right? It sounds a little woo-woo. It is not woo-woo. It is actual, real scientific evidence, y'all, that supports this practice. So let me talk a little bit more about the science behind this to explain it, and then we're going to look at those research studies. So some of this I'm going to read you from the book because it is hard for me to explain on my own using my own words because I am just wrapping my brain around this as well. So the earth is negatively charged. This is from page 64 of the earthing book. It has an endless supply of negative charged free electrons. Anytime you have two conductive objects and they make contact, such as your bare feet and the ground, electrons will flow from the place where they are abundant to the place where there are fewer of them. The electrical potential of the two objects will thus equalize. That's grounding. Similarly, when you stick a ground rod in the earth, it allows the electrons to flow from the earth via a wire into an object. It could be your refrigerator, the shielding around a cable TV system, or you. Your body is conductive, just like any other electrical being on earth. So that's a paradigm shift for me. I mean, I don't think I had ever really thought of my body as being an electrical conduit, like charged with electricity, but it is. We learned this in a long time ago in school, like physics, and the cells and biology and all these things. There are electrical charges that make up our bodies, right? So basically, what they are saying in this book is that your body has positive charged free radicals running around inside of it. And when you make contact with the earth, the negative charged earth overwhelms the little positive charged free radicals inside of your body. There is a much more technical description of this over several pages in the book, but I'm not going to read the book here to you. You should get the book and read it if you want to. It is so interesting. But essentially what happens when you connect with the earth more, and what the research studies that I will share with you shortly are showing, is that earthing or grounding helps to I forgot to tell you what grounding actually is. So there's devices that you can use for grounding indoors, like I mentioned. So those devices are like grounding sheets that actually have conductive devices, and they plug into the wall to connect to the ground rod underneath your house, like the electrical system that is plugged into the earth, which I didn't even know about the electrical system in my house. But basically you are grounding while you're sleeping if you are using special conductive sheets, which you can get on Amazon and sleep grounded. They make pillowcases, they make mats that you can put on the floor to be grounded while you are working with your feet on a mat, which I should have right now, but I don't. True confession while I'm recording this. And those are great for people who live in like colder climates where maybe it's not safe to put your feet on the ground year round, right? But those devices are grounding devices that you can use inside of a indoor situation. Oh, great too for people who live like in high rises, like maybe in an urban environment. You can plug into the wall and actually connect into the earth's electric energy that way. So that was an aside that I forgot to mention earlier. Now, what we see with these earthing studies is decreased inflammation. And when we think about, I've talked about this a little bit when I've talked about diet lately, just thinking about what we eat and the gut microbiome and things like that. Like inflammation is a huge cause of illness in our society, in our world. And so the fact that earthing can decrease inflammation in the body is huge. It reduces pain. So you guys are going to think I'm crazy. I have been sleeping with grounding sheets for a couple of weeks now, and my dreams have been so like every single night I'm dreaming, and dreaming is a sign of deep sleep, right? And I don't have as much back pain or hip pain as I used to. I have scoliosis, and I pretty much have back pain almost all the time. So it's just incredible to me, the changes in my own self. And I've also noticed that my mood is a little bit better. And now, granted, we're not in the middle of winter here when I tend to have a decrease in mood, but it's interesting for me personally, having used some of these grounding devices inside while I'm sleeping, the changes in myself, because it matches what some of the research says. Oh, the next thing on the list here, I'm on page 8 of the book, or 11 of the book at this point, improves sleep, increases energy. I would agree with those things. Lower stress, promotes calmness, normalizes the body's biological rhythms, thins blood and improves blood pressure and flow. I don't know about that. I haven't tested my blood pressure. Relieves muscle tension, headaches, lessens hormonal and menstrual symptoms, speeds healing, helps prevent bed sores, reduces or eliminates jet lag, protects the body against potentially health-disturbing environmental electromagnetic fields. This is so important with how much we are all online, connected to all these like Bluetooth devices and cell phones, and how much electromagnetic energy we all are exposing ourselves to just in recent years. We don't really know the long-term health effects of that. And so it's very important to think about protecting yourself from EMFs, so electromagnetic fields. And then also the last thing they have on this list is accelerates recovery from intense athletic activity. And it's interesting. I would say I just went back to working out pretty heavily a couple of weeks ago after taking a break from intense weightlifting. And I have not been nearly as sore. Now, it could be that I'm taking things a little easy because I'm just going back to weightlifting, but I can personally attest that I've seen some of these benefits myself using the grounding sheets and my grounding pillowcase and having the mat and those things in my house. And also because it's summer here in Wisconsin, spending a lot of time outdoors, walking, putting my feet on the ground, working outdoors with my feet on the ground, sitting on the ground, like at my son's baseball games. I've been not using a blanket, but just sitting on the earth or lounging on the grass. So if you can do that safely where you live, just going outside and like getting your feet or your body on the ground is a great way to start kind of playing with earthing or grounding and incorporating it into your lifestyle. So, all right. So that is kind of the background information. And now I want to look at a couple of different studies that I found that are pretty convincing that this is something that is relatively untapped, I feel like, in the pediatric healthcare world. So this is not going to be a typical 10-minute takeaway like I've been doing, but I do want to dive briefly into a couple of different articles. So I'm not going to go line by line and kind of do the whole layout that I usually do for a 10-minute takeaway where we do a deeper dive into one article. This is going to be more high-level, abstract kind of reviews of what these different scientific studies have found about the practice of earthing and grounding. So why don't we start out with one that looks at NICU babies? Yes, they have done work looking at babies in the NICU, and grounding these babies actually improves vagal tone. So this is an article called Electrical Grounding Improves Vagal Tone in Preterm Infants by Passi, Passi et al. There were 5 different authors here. It is in the journal Neonatology in the year 2017. And I'm going to read you a little bit of the abstract. So low vagal tone is a marker of vulnerability to stress and the risk of developing necrotizing enterocolitis in preterm infants. Electrical fields produced by equipment in the NICU induce an electrical potential measurable on the skin in reference to ground. An electrical connection to ground reduces the skin potential and improves vagal tone in adults. So they were looking at whether or not it would do the same thing in babies, and the results were very positive. So they measured 26 infants, and the results indicated that vagal tone increased by 67% when the babies were electrically grounded. So that involved like putting a little patch electrode on their skin and a wire that connected to a ground outlet. So that's pretty incredible and probably has some pretty interesting implications inside of a NICU for preventing a lot of problems that preterm babies may have. So very interesting. Their conclusion was that the electrical environment affects autonomic balance. Electrical grounding improves vagal tone and may improve resilience to stress and lower the risk of neonatal morbidity in preterm infants. So that's from very early life, even for the most vulnerable of children that are born like these teeny tiny preterm infants. Right away, early on, we're seeing implications that grounding could have some really powerful effects for future development, even, right? In kids. Like we might be preventing a lot of these kids having more significant disabilities when they're older if we start integrating grounding in the NICU setting, even really young kids. So, okay, so that's like babies. Now, I will confess I did not do an extensive search for this podcast, but I could not find a lot of literature on grounding and children. So this really needs to be an area for further research, especially as more people enter the nature-based space as pediatric therapists. Like this is a PhD study waiting to happen. If you are wanting to go get a PhD, do your PhD on this. Oh my gosh. I'm way too far into mine to be able to change at this moment, but maybe a future study I could do. So the one thing that I did find on Google Scholar. So if you don't know about Google Scholar, this is a great way to find research, scholar.google.com. And it is a extensive database. It actually is challenging to use in some ways because it's so extensive and doesn't have a lot of the filters that the university systems do, but you can find research on almost anything and a lot of it is publicly accessible. So scholar.google.com. Okay, so the one thing I did find that I wanted to share with y'all is a master's thesis entitled, How Does Grounding Affect Children with Severe to Profound Disabilities? So this was published in 2021, just a year ago, by a student named Catherine Delp, D-E-L-P, and it was an action research project conducted at Western Illinois University. So the limitation of this research was that there was only one participant. So the student doing the research was looking at only one child. So that does limit the generalizability of the findings, essentially, but I do think it's still worth discussing or mentioning here because there were some interesting findings. So the participant in the study was a teenager who was 14 years old with severe to profound disabilities. She did not use language to communicate, so she had an assistive technology device, and there were several challenging behaviors happening that were really limiting her participation at school and home. And so the study looked at 30 minutes a day of grounding affecting the child's mood, their behaviors, and their engagement in tasks. So there were different measures that they used. And again, I'm not going to go into great detail here, but I will read you the conclusion summary, which is that the data indicated a child with severe to profound disabilities showed improvements in their mood, behavior, and level of engagement while using a grounding mat on a daily basis. So without going into all of the data and the findings and the statistics and all the scores and everything that she found, the results were positive. And I think what this tells us is that grounding or earthing are very easy to implement strategies for any kind of kid that we would see in therapy, right? And what we're doing in our outdoor work is like really getting kids in touch with the earth, right? Like their body is outdoors in nature. So this is a cool way too. I just thought of this as I was speaking about the findings here. This is a really cool way too to think about our work as nature-based therapists. How can we bring the outdoors in? And grounding and earthing might be a way to do that in a very low cost, easy to do way for a wide variety of the kids that we see as therapists. So cool little master's thesis there. And now let's go on to the next one. This one is from the Journal of Inflammation Research in 2015 by Oschman, Oschman, and a few other authors. The effects of grounding, earthing, on inflammation, the immune response, wound healing, and prevention and treatment of chronic inflammatory and autoimmune diseases. So when we think about health in our world today, many of the diseases that we are seeing that are really impacting people are inflammatory and autoimmune diseases. So the authors here looked at a variety of different research, and it looks like what they were trying to do, this wasn't a systematic review. It was more a summary or review of research to share with their profession, essentially, in this journal. And there are some really great photos in this specific article that show the effect of wound healing, the effect of grounding on wound healing, and how quickly wounds heal when a person is grounded versus not grounded. So anyway, this article basically looked at a lot of different studies, and what they're finding was that grounding an organism produces measurable differences in the concentrations of white blood cells, cytokines, and other molecules involved in the inflammatory response. And then in the article, they're presenting hypotheses to kind of explain the observed effect based on what research says and their understanding of the electronic aspects of cell and tissue physiology, cell biology, biophysics, and biochemistry. As I mentioned earlier, this can get very technical. The science behind this can get very technical, which is not my intention with this podcast, because I want you to be able to use this in practice. The reason I shared this article is to tell you that there is this complex scientific evidence behind the practice of simply putting your feet on the earth. And I think it's really cool to share with families that this science is out there. Maybe I should do an infographic. That just gave me a great, actually, I'm going to do that. We're going to do an infographic in the Therapy in the Great Outdoors site in the library and put it in the library for people that are in our Tigo library. I want you guys to have some sort of visual to be able to share this information with families in a way that's kind of fun and makes sense to them. Don't worry, I won't be going into the biophysics or biochemistry, but to summarize some of this research, to say, like, this is why it's important to put your feet on the earth and to let your kids go barefoot when it's safe to do so, of course. Okay, so they also suggested that grounding reduces pain and alters the numbers of circulating neutrophils and lymphocytes and affects various circulating chemical factors related to inflammation. And then the article goes into great detail about that. So I will link this one also in the show notes. I think let's do one more. This is getting to be a long episode because there's so much evidence out there, and it is just really cool to see this. Yes. Okay. So I have all these articles open on tabs on my computer, and I'm so excited to talk about this one because it is the gold standard of all research, a randomized controlled trial all about earthing and grounding. So the title of this one is The Effects of Grounding, Earthing on Body Workers' Pain and Overall Quality of Life, a randomized controlled trial. So this is a study, and I'm just noticing that Deepak Chopra is one of the authors. That's kind of cool. The main author is Chevalier, Chevalier, and a variety of other people also contributed to this study. So what they did in this study, this was with massage therapists. So this is with an adult population, right? So I know on this podcast, I am mostly talking to pediatric practitioners, but I think this study should be included in our conversations about grounding because it is a randomized control trial. And so that really does give us some information. Now, limitation, again, a small sample size. They only had 16 people that participated in the study. The mean age was about 42 years old, 42, 43 years old. So they did this study. Oh, that's why Deepak Chopra was an author, because they did it at the Chopra Center for Wellbeing in Carlsbad, California. So the purpose of the study was to determine the effects of grounding on massage therapists' quality of life and pain. This is interesting because they define grounding as referring to being in direct body contact with the ground, such as walking barefoot on soil or grass. But then they talk about how in the study, they were grounded using a electrical device. So that is interesting. They used a grounding mat underneath the massage table so that their feet were connected to the grounding mat while they were giving massages. So anyway, important when you write up research to be very clear with your definitions, because their definition should have included or connecting to a grounding mat. So anyway, okay, so they used a type of RCT that I I haven't heard of this, a stepped wedge cluster design. So basically they describe what they did, so I can tell you what that is. They split the group into two cohorts, so 8 people and 8 people. And the therapists were not grounded for the first week while they were working. They were grounded while working for the next 4 weeks, and then were not grounded for the last week. And then they compared data on pain, physical function, anxiety, depression, fatigue, tiredness, sleep disturbance, and number of hours of sleep, number of clients that they worked on each day, energy, and emotional and mental stress. So I have to say, as someone who is learning how to do research right now, I'm a little concerned with the outcome measures in this study just because they're trying to measure too many things. And when you do good research, you want to really focus on measuring a few things, or else you confound the study in some way. So it's a little bit like, wow, they're really measuring a lot there, trying to find any kind of effect that this may have had. So, but the results are interesting, right? So as a group, the therapist experienced significant increases in physical function and energy, and decreases in fatigue, depression, tiredness, and pain while grounded as compared to not being grounded. And even 1 month following the study, physical function was increased and depressed mood and fatigue were decreased. So the findings really say that this did seem to have some sort of positive effect for the body workers, because that's a hard job, right? Like you're really, as a massage therapist, you are using your body to heal other people. And I imagine that the fatigue is very real in that type of role, that type of a body worker or healer. So that is it for the research I am going to review on this episode. Let's talk about the takeaways for us as pediatric nature-based therapists. I think the evidence is pretty clear that this is something we can easily, low cost, low commitment, doesn't take a lot of time or energy. I mean, truly, y'all, this is something we could tell parents, get a grounding mat for your kid, and while they are watching TV, put their elbows or their body on the mat, or let them sit on the mat, or put their feet on the mat. I'm telling you, this is a way that we can bring nature in. Not that I want kids on TVs all the time. Don't judge me for that. But like, really, I mean, I think this is a way that we could implement bringing the outdoors in a way that is very simple and very easy for families to implement, as well as the other takeaway is to just get kids to take their shoes off or put their feet and their hands on the earth. What we are doing in our nature-based work is actually impacting kids internally in ways that we cannot even see. I talked about this on the episode where I talk about the gut microbiome. This is another example of that, how when we put children's bodies in contact with the earth, we are actually helping them to be healthier inside in those invisible ways that we can't even sometimes observe, but hopefully we do observe by increased mood and behavior. I mean, this is interesting that this is something that maybe could be researched in the future to actually look at the observable effects of grounding in children. Research is needed on this topic because there is not much out there that I found in my brief search for this podcast. So I had limited time today, y'all, but I really wanted to get this out to you. And yeah, I want to hear your thoughts on this. So reach out on the Therapy in the Great Outdoors community, the free discussion area. We always put a post for the podcast, so you can weigh in there and let me know your thoughts and your experiences, or kids that you have seen experiences with grounding and earthing. I cannot wait to hear what you think about this. Talk to you there. I'll see you inside the community. Bye. Thank you so much for spending time with me today, exploring therapy in the great outdoors. If you liked what you heard in this episode, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes so we can share the magic of nature-based therapy with a wider audience of therapists who work with children who desperately need connection to nature nowadays, just like we do. If you're ready to take the next step in this adventure, join our free Therapy in the Great Outdoors community at therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com. The TIGO community is a private space just for nature-based pediatric practitioners. We have loads of resources there to support you as you start or grow a nature-based practice or program. Our free TIGO community has a discussion forum, a jobs and volunteers board, a crowdsourced treatment activities section, as well as free video trainings, research article reviews, and book recommendations from yours truly. Head on over to therapyinthegreatoutdoors.com to join today. So until next time, get outside, connect, reflect, and enjoy the business and practice of therapy in the great outdoors.